1860, South Eastern Railway decided to build a railway which would link up Brighton and Eastbourne. LBSCR saw this as a threat, so they decided to build a 20-mile link between Haywards Heath, Uckfield and Hailsham, even though they knew this wouldn't be a profitable line. LBSCR proposed this to the government in 1863 and later got grants a few months later. One of the major financiers of the line decided that it would be a good idea to finance most of the line. Unfortunately, in 1867, construction had to be halted as a financier ended up going bankrupt, which left LBSCR in a position that they couldn't continue the line, so construction was halted. So at the moment, as you can see, I am on the old embankment. Now it's a bit cold and chilly today, but at least I'm getting out for exercise. But the embankment curves off that side as well as that side. And this was going to be twin tracked, one of course leading up to Hailsham, and one of course leading down to Haywards Heath. Now this, if you go down back that way, that takes you down to Uckfield. Now the line was going to connect onto what was the original line between Lewes and Uckfield at the time, which connected London and Lewes together. Now that would have been a great coastal route, but unfortunately the route was closed in 1966, if not give or take a few years. That's what I know from my local knowledge in Wikipedia, though Wikipedia isn't always that accurate. But this line, there was a good 2 miles of construction, about 3 miles approximately construction in Haywards Heath, where the line was going to come down, and then 2 miles here leading up to Uckfield, which is where construction stopped. The line never connected together, though it was proposed that the line could take about 10 years in construction, though it was only about 3 years and then construction stopped. So this is where one of the major bridges was going to be. Just over there, I think there's a cutting just there, is where the other embankment is, and that takes you up to Uckfield. So I believe this would have been a viaduct, if not a very long bridge, but it was actually going to be quite tall, as the embankment here is about 20-30 foot, give or take a few feet, but over on the embankment over there it was only about 10 foot, so viaduct, bridge, I'm not really sure what was going to happen. So we're now on the second side of the embankment. This is where the two ends of the bridges would have connected. One here, one back down that end, as you can see the trees of the old embankment just there. And it was proposed that this bridge was going to have 5 arches. I've just looked this up, and it wasn't going to be a viaduct as such, but it was going to have 5 arches and it was going to be curved. So I don't really know if that's classed as a viaduct or if it's just a normal bridge. But we've got the curve. I think these are facings. You can't really tell, but going around the side there's a curve on that side, and there's a curve on that side as well. You can actually get onto the track bed. I'm just trying to find an entrance that I'm not going to slip over because the ground is quite muddy. But I believe from here onto this embankment it actually switches into 3 tracks, one especially for goods going up to Haywards Heath and the 2 for passenger. I may be wrong, but that's what I've read, and it also is wide enough to have 3 tracks, so I could be right. So we are now on the embankment heading towards Haywards Heath, and this takes you up towards the northern line, which connects up Haywards Heath and Eastfield. Now the tunnel was going to be about a mile and a half long, but construction never actually happened of the old line, and the tunnel was starting to be dug out, but they never actually connected the two ends up. Now, a bit further on along the track bed, there was actually a point which was removed in 1890 because the line was abandoned in 1868, and then they came back and took up the track that was here because they had to kind of take away all the mud in wagons and stuff like that, and they took it up to London, which is where I think it helped to build one of the major lines up there. I'm not particularly sure what line, but it helped to build one of the major lines which connects up London with the outskirts. Now it starts to widen out just here. Now coming up here, you'll see how wide it starts to get. You can already see the curve. It's starting to curve out that way, and it starts to widen out on that side as well. So we'll see in a minute how wide it gets, and you can see how steep the embankments get on each side. Now, if you don't know who Paul and Rebecca Whitewick, hopefully I pronounced that right, they are a channel that basically look at every single abandoned railway and least used railways in the whole of England. Now they came down here last year in July, and they actually went up along there, and they didn't actually come down onto the old track bed. Now, as you can see, it's now widened out a lot, and there's enough to fit 3 tracks on here. Now I believe one of these was for goods and the other 2 were for passenger. The goods was going to be turned into an express line on Sundays when goods weren't operating, and the goods were going to be taken down to the Uckfield yard, distributed, and then sent either down to Lewis, Hailsham, or it would be taken back up to London. Now Haywards Heath was actually quite a busy station at the time, and still is. I believe it had a goods yard and whatnot, and there was a sorting depot for and a shunting yard for sorting the wagons and all that sort of stuff. Now, the construction at Haywards Heath, as I was talking about, was a 3-mile construction, which we'll be looking at some point later. But it actually never got, well, the 2 ends never connected, even though it was proposed that it would only take about 10 years to build. Now, the line just over there, it's about a 10-minute walk now to where the tunnel mouth was going to be built. There have been a few times where people have proposed to reopen this line and try and get it rebuilt, but there's now houses in the way, and I don't think the people living in the houses would be very happy, and I just don't think it would be possible to reopen the line.